Hi and welcome everybody. I'm Debbie Murphy, the president of OpsCentral. Thanks for joining us from all around the world, and particularly those who have had a very early start. I'm looking at you in Australia, and a late end to the day. We appreciate that if we do these kind of internationally, somebody's got to lose out all the time. So we appreciate that you are accommodating us. Today's roundtable discussion is on community engagement. We have booked in a roundtable discussion once a month until the end of the year. That was based on the feedback of the leadership roundtable, and we're pleased to see that we've already got people signed up for all of them. We're covering topics like culture and change, firefighter wellbeing, training, and smart cities for emergency management, and we have an incredible lineup of speakers for all of them. We promote all of them on LinkedIn, so I'd suggest following OpsCentral if you don't want to miss out. This is the series for this year, but we will be booking some more and following that. Or subscribe on YouTube, and you'll get notifications as we post new content on there. If you would like to know more about OpsCentral, feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, and we can arrange a chat. Those of you that are connected already will see I posted yesterday we are busy building out a strategic advisory group for OpsCentral, and we're always looking for firefighters to help with feedback and usability testing. It's really important to us that we actually build stuff that is easy to use, and the only way to make sure of that is to actually get people to use it and tell us what we can do better. So please, again, reach out if you know anyone who might enjoy the process. I hope you got a chance to watch the intro videos from our panel. We do this to save time so that we don't spend, the first kind of 15 minutes introducing everybody. You can go back to our LinkedIn page and have a look at them if you're interested. And it has obviously the details of all of the speakers, or you can connect with them on LinkedIn if you have any direct questions. I will point out that today's speakers actually come from, live in 5 different countries. So they have very different contexts and challenges. And we're super excited that we're getting this to spend this time together to share and learn from each other. So with that, we're going to get started. And I'm going to put the first question to you, Pat. What is the value of community engagement to both the fire service and the community?
It's huge, Debbie. It is absolutely massive because as managers of a service, or indeed as any employer, will be the whole idea, the whole goal of what you do is to bring people to be the best that they can be. And by community engagement, that is what we do. We actually get the communities to be the best that they can be. And hopefully at the end of it, safer as well. It's a mutually beneficial approach that favours the community as well as fire service. As managers of fire services, it's hugely important to us to be aware of the risks and hazards within the community. There's no getting away from that. And by doing so, we can manage our resources in such a way to ensure that the response that we do and the response that we provide is actually fit for purpose. And that's the most important thing as well. The second thing is you must realise that in relation to community engagement, we're not the only players in the arena in relation to community safety. And I think we know ourselves in Ireland that we have built strong links into other areas with other providers. For example, in my own situation, we have identified elderly people as being particularly high risk from fires of all sorts, and not just from fatal fires, but from serious injuries and indeed burns. And what we've done is we've worked with the public health nurses to promote fire safety on our behalf, but also to act as a bridge between us as a uniformed service and to the public by using a familiar face and somebody that they are comfortable with. It's quite difficult for us to get into somebody's home, Debbie, but it is equally important that we establish good collaborative relationships with other providers of community needs or community services. And I won't say jump on their back to get them to do the work for us, but to actually provide a bridge between us and the vulnerable in the community so that we can address any issues in relation to fire safety. And the one last point I'd like to make is this. In where I work here in the Midlands in Ireland, it's a case that we depend very much on retained or volunteer firefighters. And if we have a community that understands the type of work that we do and respect the work that we do, then it ensures that we have a community that is aware of what we do for various sections, but also as well, by that awareness, it allows them and their employers to actually release them into our service to ultimately continue a line of recruitment and securing a resilience within our own organizations.
Thanks very much, Pat. That actually segues really nicely to the next question, and I'm going to get both Graham first and then Celine to answer this one. How important is building trust with the community in order to actually have good engagement?
Yeah, thanks, Debbie, and good morning, everyone, or good morning for me, good evening for some of you. Yeah, in building trust is so important when engaging with the community. As a fire service, we have a really privileged place in the community as a trusted organisation. Surveys conducted here in Australia consistently place firefighters as one of, if not the most trusted of professions. What I think differentiates firefighters from other professionals is their ability to act on instinct and adapt their skills and equipment to a variety of unknown environments where time really counts. In the absence of trust, community engagement will be very problematic at best. Although fire services are coming from a starting point of good community trust, this should never be taken for granted. I said that there are a number of priorities to building and maintaining community trust. I think respect is probably right up there with the most important of these. And whilst firefighters may be respected by most of the community, it is vital that this respect is a two-way street. Firefighters must mirror this respect from the community. Communication also is really key here for building trust. It's really an enabler of that trust building. And respect is built on good communication. While it's important that fire services get the message across about fire safety to the community, a key to communicating this message is listening. Through effective listening, firefighters will get an understanding of where the other person is at, and also a better understanding of their fire risk profile, which allows for a more targeted message to the needs of the actual individual. We need to value diversity. Valuing diversity recognises differences between people and acknowledges that these differences are a valued asset. Fire services around the world are recognising the benefits of diversity within their own organisations. In our communities, we see fire service as reflective of the diverse nature of the community around them, and this will provide the building blocks of trust. It's also important that the community sees the fire services as a competent organisation. Community trust can be strengthened by community having confidence in the level of professionalism that is displayed by our fire services. In this world where everyone is carrying a camera and very quick to video emergency services at work, public confidence in the fire service that we offer can be gained or stripped away really quickly in a short space of time. And finally, I think care. All of this should be built on an attitude of care for the community. Having this attitude of authentic care for the community, both corporately and individually, is central to building and maintaining trust. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks,
Thank
Graham.
you, Graham.
Straight on to you, Celine.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and I would like to add that, of course, like building trust is very important when engaging with the community. It's important to build strong relationships between internal and external communities to help fire services make great decisions. Indeed, we can see that faith in government is constantly being questioned, but the fire services, as you said, enjoy a high level of public trust. But of course, we should not take it for granted because, for example, in France, we see that violence against firefighters is becoming increasingly common. It reflects a climate of distress and anger, especially among teenagers, against any kind of authority, and firefighters are among them. So in 2018, nearly 3,500 firefighters reported being victims of an assault, up to 900 10 years earlier, and a 21% increase compared to 2017. So we can see that building trust is crucial to make people better understand what we do and what our role is. This would allow us to work in better conditions and to make people feel safe when seeing us. So indeed, the fire service has historically had a strong mission and culture, so namely to help others in their time of need. But it's even more important to rebuild public trust during times of crisis, as we know now with COVID-19, etc. But now fire service leaders also face a new challenge in being deemed guilty by association with police officers, for example, during recent national emergencies, whether they be in the US or in France. For example, in France, we have launched a national campaign called Don't Touch My Firefighter to firmly condemn every assault against firefighters. We have also made a video clip with a rap artist to show that firefighters and policemen are here to help the population. So we could wonder how we could maintain or restore the public's trust. And as you said, Graham, we first need to deliver a service with respect, and I would add dignity, even if it's not given in return. Indeed, communication is key, and we should ensure that we work with professionalism to deliver uniform levels of service to every home or business. And if we are not able to reach this level of standards, we should change our policy, training, supervision, and training to make sure that we are delivering such service. We could also get out of the station and out of the truck to engage in prevention, education, and outreach to make sure to have this strong relationship with the community and make sure that we empathize our strengths and services instead of our opinions and politics.
Thanks very much, Celine. I'm going to throw this one to Chief Sawyer and also back to Graham. And for a lot of you actually have relatively large communities that you're working with. And I want to know how you go about identifying the most vulnerable parts of the community so that you know where to spend your energy and how to engage. We'll start with you, Chief Sawyer.
Thanks, Debbie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Well, you want to first identify them based off the demographics that your fire service is serving. So you have your demographics, your geographics, what type of industry or infrastructure you have, your public building stock, and then what are the community organizations within your community? Do you have a large population of foreigners? What about your faith-based community? What are they like? And then you want to talk about what type of hazards that you've already responded to, what type of hazards you anticipate having to respond to, and then what is the past loss history? So you've already probably had some type of incidents occur in your jurisdiction, and you want to look at those past incidents and see what type of risk or what demographics were susceptible to those risks so that you can prepare for that. And then what's your critical infrastructure like? Do you have a rail system? Do you have a water system? What type of critical infrastructure do you have that you want to make sure you need to protect? So if you don't have the ability or software to look at all those things, one of the basic things you can do is start off with your run data. When you look at your run data, we keep a track of all the runs we go to in a log. And if you look at your run data and say, where have we gone to in the last year, last 2 years, or 3 to 5 years, and say, okay, we've been to these places. What's the demographics? Is it older adults? are their children. So, for example, we had a year where we thought the high-risk population were older adults and young children. And once we did a risk assessment, we realized that they were in the age of 50 to 60, which is unusual. Normally it's 65 and older or 5 and under. So you take all the information and gather it, and it's going to kind of help you identify where your high risk population is at.
Thanks, Shuto. Over to you, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Fire services resources aren't unlimited, so there's a real need to prioritise our limited resources to ensure that the use of are effective and the most effective at reducing the community risk. It's important to target our efforts where the most at risk in the community reside. Here within my fire service, Fire and Rescue New South Wales, we use an online risk management tool which uses research and imported demographic data and incident history as well to tell us who in our communities are most at risk of having a home fire. This tool allows individual stations to have a better understanding of the risk profile in their local community. This information is used then to help the firefighters to plan and conduct what we call safety visits at the homes of the most at risk. Our safety visits program is a prevention and early intervention initiative which will build capacity and resilience in disadvantaged and vulnerable communities in respect to home fire safety. The program aims to support operational firefighters in the implementation of safety visits, providing education, advice and intervention at these at-risk households. This program was developed using evidence-based information to drive down the frequency and severity of fires, reduce the economic burden of the recovery from these fires, and also reduce fire-related injuries. During a safety visit deployment, firefighters will visit identified higher risk households and ensure that they have at least one working smoke alarm on each level of their home and provide home fire safety advice and information. The use of our online risk management tool allows our firefighters to make informed decisions around where best to target their effort in the application of a risk reduction intervention. In the past 12 months, up until the end of June this year, firefighters in New South Wales conducted 33,000 home fire safety visits. The use of our online risk management tool was a key to this success. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Right, Martin, this one's straight to you. I'm not, is your video working there? I can kind of see that you've joined us. So what responsibility does the fire service have to engage with the community during each of the phase of emergency management? A lot of what we've been talking about is kind of in the prevention side, but there's also preparedness, response, recovery. Talk to us about the different ways you can engage in each phase. We look like we have minor technical difficulties. We'll give Martin, oh, there he is. Perfect timing. Right, just in case you missed it, have you got the question, Martin?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie. Greetings from Nigeria. I guess I can be heard very well. The network here is shaky. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're clear now. Started off. Yep, we're all good.
Okay. Thank you very much once more. We're having a network challenge, but notwithstanding, let's move on. The question regards the responsibility. What responsibility does the fire service have to engage with community during each phase of emergency management, prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery? First of all, we will need to look at what community engagement is all about, which is a critical component of emergency management and action to reduce disaster risk and strengthen resilience. It's a community engagement is a way also to ensure that communities and members has access to valued social settings and activities, feeling that they are able to contribute
Oh, Martin, you're cutting off a little bit there.
meaningfully to those activities which will help to develop
Martin,
a
Martin, sorry, we're just going
functional
to pause you for a second.
capabilities that enable them to participate fully. The
Thanks,
main
Martin.
role, the main role of which
Right, we're going to pause on Martin there. We'll try and get back to him because I'm keen to hear. Martin, your internet is cutting in and out. So we're going to move to the next question, but we might try and follow up as it kind of gets clear. It started off wonderfully and then it started cutting out. So we're just going to move on to the next question, but we'll do our best to come back as it comes clear. Thanks. Right, so, you know, as something really close to all of us at the heart of kind of OpsCentral, I'm keen to know from Chief Lewis and Chief Sawyer, what value does data have in supporting and community engagement initiatives?
Well, thank you. And data is something that I'm very, very passionate about with driving decision making. So let's just talk about what data is first of all. So data has been defined as distinct pieces of information, usually formatted or stored in a way that's concordant with a specific purpose. This is beyond just, you know, tables and forms, though, because data can exist in various forms that include facts living in a person's mind. So I think it's important that we consider this aspect of data as well. Data helps us define what the problem is. It is really our, you know, when you do on a research paper, you do the problem statement. And so data helps us define what the problem is. You know, when we see run numbers, when we see call volumes, when we see it to just specific areas, as Chief Sawyer already talked about, and that helps us determine where those vulnerable areas of the community are. But this really is our problem statement. It makes things clear. It helps to quantify a challenge for more clear articulation. When you can state with clear facts, you know, there was this many calls in this neighborhood and they occurred at this time of day, and this was the outcome of those, whether those were, you know, slips, trips, and falls, whether they were cardiac arrests. But it really helps us to quantify that challenge. And when I mentioned cardiac, you know, arrests, so if you look at things like the American Heart Association data that shows, you know, 4 to 6 minutes before brain death occurs, the impact that this kind of data has when it comes to response time shows that what the impact is for a timely and professional response in association with the activation of the 911 system. You know, the importance of high quality CPR, early defibrillation, rapid ALS response, and transport to an appropriate facility, when benchmarked with appropriate times and then shown by patient outcomes, really shows the value of your fire and emergency services. Another way that data can support community engagement initiatives is when you show a risk, such as cooking fires, which make up, you know, nationwide more than 50% of all of our fires. Some of the research that we did here in the city of Virginia showed that, you know, cooking fires were well over that. And then so that helped us to quantify you know, where our threats were, and then we developed a campaign to reduce those cooking fires, and then measured how that response was going, you know, through that community engagement, public relations types of things, demonstrations. So the importance that data has in supporting community engagement initiatives, I would say, is that there is a way to raise the view of that problem to a place that people understand. It's not just in a table or a format, but if you can put it into a graphic, or you can put it into visualization of such as a video that shows the dangers of cooking fires, or, you know, how dangerous it is to inappropriately address cooking fires, such as, you know, throwing water on a grease fire, things like that. But the data really has to show, these are how many of these incidents are occurring, and these are the seriousness of the outcomes, and then here's the mitigation factors that we can take to reduce it. I would also say that data can also spur your community to engage in an initiative which makes them safer from a prevention side. One of the things that we were very successful here was spurring community engagement with regard to a new public safety facility. So the Friends of Public Safety, that was an organized grassroots group, wrote letters. They lobbied, legislators. They made statements to the media about how important it was. Our fire hall was built in 1907. It literally housed horses at one point. We need a new fire station, and thankfully we're in the process of getting that because of the community engagement and the support that was received from our community in that new fire hall.
Thanks, Chief Lewis. Your views, Chief, sorry.
Thanks, Debbie. So to Chief Allen's point, one of the things that data does, it provides credibility to your organization. So when in the past, a lot of times in the fire service, we would give anecdotal evidence of things that occurred into the community. Now with data, it adds credibility. And with that credibility, it helps you educate the community of what those risks are, the actions they should take to reduce those risks, and have them part of the solution. So that's where the community engagement comes. You educate them with the data and allow them to become engaged in how they can protect themselves. Also, it helps institutionalize the knowledge that the community has. They can say, well, we know for a fact that we have more cooking fires than incendiary fires and so forth. And then that data also helps build collaboration. So if you use the data in the right way and you educate your community, you build that collaborative spirit. That's going to be the most important piece, increase engagement. And it aids in the decision-making process. When you engage the community using data, they can make better informed decisions about their own safety. So, for example, when I was the commissioner of Philadelphia, we had a fire where we lost a large number of people. And the community had a perception that we didn't do our job and respond in a timely manner. And by us providing them with the evidence and the data, it changed the tone from a combative tone to a more collaborative tone. And then we were able to work together to make sure we never had another incident like that occur. So I think that data piece is really important now. I think more fire departments are becoming engaged with the community by using data, and it gives us, like I said, that added trust.
Thanks, Chief Sawyer. I know that social media has actually caused a lot of challenges from an engagement perspective, because there's a lot of sharing that goes on between the community, but it also provides an opportunity to build trust. Those of you that are interested in, I think, a campaign that's been really effective, if you look at what the New Zealand police have done to build their trust, they've got an awesome kind of really human campaign, building on the Kiwi quite dry sense of humour. It's well worth looking at their Twitter, and it's had massive impact in terms of and how they're communicating has increased engagement enormously. But I'm keen to chat to Pat and Celine and Martin, if we can get your connection working, to hear from your perspective how social media usage has changed the approach to engaging with the community. So
I suppose I'll kick off there, Debbie, by saying that, yes, it is a fantastic tool in the sense that you can have a much greater reach than actually putting feet on the ground. For example, traditionally here in Ireland, we've had National Fire Safety Week running from the first week in October. And normally we would have personnel tied up in leaflet distribution, etc., etc. And I made the decision a number of years ago to actually switch from that particular engagement model to a more online version, and aiming a Twitter and Facebook campaign in conjunction with our own National Directorate in Fire and Emergency Management. And it has been incredible because you're reaching people that normally you wouldn't reach. For example, if you're going down to shopping centres or you're going down to various commercial outlets, you're mixing with a particular demographic, which is quite fine. Whereas if you move to an online platform, you're engaging with people that you wouldn't traditionally get to meet, or people that engage in a bit different way. Now, in saying that, the online and social media platforms are not the only game in town. We must be cognizant of that, because where I'm working in a rural community, you have issues with broadband and broadband access. Equally, you have an elderly demographic, what Chief Sawyer said, the importance of having the data and knowing your groupings and your communities. And because of that, I'm very wary of developing just something that is just a campaign or program on fire safety that is just looking at the social media platforms as the key and sole provider. We're looking at, particularly in elderly communities and rural settings, with more personal engagement, and that involves going out and physically talking to people, meeting them in social groups, for example, Age Action Group, which I work with here in Ireland, in just meeting them in a kind of a day centre where they're having a cup of tea, they're having a particular chat, they're having a social outlet, and you come in for about half an hour, you give out the usual leaflets, but also as well you engage with them, and they in turn will come as you're having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever. They will come to you and say, look, I have a particular problem. How would you address this? What would your advice be? Rather than in a group setting. And that is impactful, because it's like dropping a stone into a pond. The ripples that create spread out into the community, and you actually do get engagement at a particularly local level.
All right, what are your thoughts, Celine?
Thank you, Pat. So yes, of course, social media help us build a trusting relationship with the population, and especially younger generations. And I think the potential of social networks in crisis management was revealed during Hurricane Sandy in 2012 in the United States. And social media help us build relationship with community along 4 dimensions. So first, prevention. In France, for example, we communicate a lot during summer to raise awareness about drowning risks, but also fire risks. You also have the dimension of informing the population, whether it be for a special event, an accident, or a fire currently going on. But I think it's important to also underline the fact that we also use social media to receive information from the community, even before arriving on site. For example, when a fire starts, you can have some images of that fire from the social media to see to what extent the fire will be a big fire, whether you need more human resources, etc. And also, for example, in France, a few months ago, we had a phone outage, which prevented the emergency services from responding to calls. So their social media were crucial because we used them to communicate about this phone outage, to give replacement numbers, but also people could even contact us through social media in case of emergency. So there we see that information is very crucial, even if, of course, we do have the problem of fake news. So we have to make sure that we master information. The third dimension is recruitment. Indeed, we use social media to communicate about recruitment process, but also offers within fire services. And we know that younger generations see these posts, so it's better to recruit through these channels. And last but not least, I think the image is very important on social media, because this means help us improve our image towards younger generations, to encourage them to get involved with the fire service. And firefighters can also share their daily lives and work. And I think it's very important, because when you don't have a family within fire services, then usually people don't know what we do, what is our daily work. So it's better for people to discover our world, our work, to better understand what we do, and hopefully make them want to join us.
Thanks, Elaine. Martin, hopefully we get sound working for you, and if it, and he's just jumped off again. I'm really keen for Martin to answer this question because despite the connectivity issues today, what he does personally in terms of social media, and I've really enjoyed kind of following him on LinkedIn, so I think he's got some incredibly valuable stuff to say. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to pause on that one. There is a question from the group around how to engage with kids and the importance of engaging with kids. Pat, are you happy to take this while we see if Martin joins us again?
Certainly, not a problem, Debbie. In relation to working with kids, we're lucky here in Ireland that we actively promote kindergarten kids and preschoolers to come into the station and just kind of get familiar with what we do. And as the saying goes, it's never too early. But it's important that when they come into the station, you can't give them a very, very hard sell message in relation to fire safety. But what we do is we give them colouring sheets that they can go home, colour, and then fix onto the fridge or whatever at home. And it allows some sort of debate in relation to the overall issue of fire safety. In Ireland as well, since 2006, we've introduced a programme of targeted community fire safety for 9 to 10-year-olds. And Debbie, you know yourself that if you have a 9 to 10-year-old that has had a firefighter come to the primary school and kind of given them the pack on community fire safety, then they will go home and they will plague their mother, father, caregiver, whatever. Where's our smoke alarm? What do we do in the event of fire? Where's our escape strategy? Do you know that this is dangerous? And so on, and it really, really engages them. And finally, I've been blessed with the experience of working with a colleague of mine, Finney and Joyce, along with 7 transnational partners throughout Europe, in developing a program called the Be Fire Safe at School program, which is, if just a quick blurb, is available on befiresafe@school.eu. It's an online resource targeted at post-primary children, teens from 12 to 18, and it's been targeted as age appropriate. But getting back to the point that Solange made about having content that actually, engages, the actual package itself is an online platform that is free, that allows children in a post-primary atmosphere to learn about fire safety and various aspects of it. But also as well, it makes use of audio recordings, as well as augmented reality that has been developed by a firm in Ireland, and also as well makes use of gaming technology that has been developed by our partners in Bilbao. So again, as Celine said earlier on, it's important that if we are looking at engaging with particular communities and particularly the young, that we have something that is both age appropriate and actually works and engages with them, that actually holds their attention and gets them on board and actually gets them thinking and talking about what we want them talking about, leading to safer communities. The final point I'll make is this, that if you're dealing with children, from a fire services management perspective, it brings its own extra burden, in the sense that you must ensure that all of your staff, all of your firefighters that have contact with vulnerable groups are suitably trained, and that there are policies in place to ensure data protection, child protection, etc., etc. And it is vitally important that we do so, because, as Celine said, and I think it was Derek that said it as well, that if you have any sort of negative image being generated in the community and ultimately in the online community, that misinformation can be both career defining as well as trust destroying. And it's vitally important that if you are engaging with children in particular, that you have all your checks and balances in place, and that you have a system of policies in place and procedures in place, not alone to protect yourself, but to protect the people that you work with.
Thanks, Pat. You're so right. My daughter's actually nearly 17 now, but I recall her being probably 7 or 8, and coming home from school with a little piece of paper where we had to draw out our escape route, and then she made us practice several times. And I'm pretty certain if somebody had given me that piece of paper at work, it would have remained on my desk. So certainly a lot more effective to get children to get the family engaged. Right. We don't seem to have Martin joined us back again. What I'm going to suggest, unless we get very lucky, is that we will actually get Martin to record some of his questions and answers out of this. I don't want to miss out on his valuable insight. He has such an interesting perspective, and we will just post them in the event after this, so that we can all engage. I'm really quite sad that he can't be answering for us. But we have got another question that's come through. Once you have valuable data from CIR programs, can fire departments leverage this hard-earned data to get city officials to get more funding to support other purchases like trucks and PPE? And if we can go to Chief Lewis and then Chief Sawyer, if you've got a view too.
So this is a great question, because I want to break it down when we look at this, because the premise of the question is can you use the CRR data to get more funding to support trucks and PPE? I would say look at your data and see where the actual problem is. Be very careful about having a conclusion already drawn and then using data to support that. I would say follow the data first and say, well, where is your actual problem? If it slips, trips, and falls, or like in our community, 86% of our calls for service are medical in nature. And I'll give you the example that initially when I joined, we would only hire firefighter paramedics on the department. Well, it soon became apparent that there was not enough firefighter paramedics only to serve the entire community. There just wasn't enough qualified applicants in this area. And we changed our hiring practices so that we could hire EMTs in conjunction with paramedics. So not every single member of the department had to be a paramedic and a firefighter, which is a considerable amount more training. We were able to still carry out our mission given a different mixed level of service. So not everybody was a paramedic firefighter. So I would say look at your data and really look at what the actual problem is before you are fixated on, it's more trucks or more PPE or more stations. Maybe it's a relocation of the current stations that you have. Maybe it's changing a configuration model into, a split medic fire type of crew, what we call a swing crew. So really follow the data and really clearly define the problem, and then look at what that gap analysis shows on where you want to be, where you currently are, and what you need to get there.
Thanks. Over to you, Chief Sawyer.
Thanks, Debbie. I think Chief Allen did a great job of explaining that, but what I would add is that you want to make sure your request falls in line with your mission, your goals and your mission. So when you're going through your CR programs and you're starting to target your risk and you're reducing the risk, you have to say, what's the value added? How does that reduction of risk impact not only your department, but the community and the government as a whole? And then you got to align that with your goals and your mission. So if your mission is to reduce the number of fires and you need more apparatus and PPE to do that, and you show that you're reducing it, you need more apparatus and PPE to do that, then of course you can use that information to get the funding. But the key is, once you have the data and you decipher it and a target or risk, how does it fall in line with your goals and your mission? What's your mission statement? And tie all those requests to your mission statement for not only your department, but for your community. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, and great point there. I'm going to move over to Pat, who I know we've already spoken about programs with children. But are there any other programs that you've found really effective? And I see that there are actually some questions in the chat to understand more about the programs. I don't know if when you finish this, if you want to post the link in there so that people can go and get more information, that would be great.
Certainly, Debbie. That's not a problem. As I said, it's what we developed here, as I said, in Europe, has been funded by the European Commission and is a transnational partnership. And something that I was meaning to say and must come back to now is the fact, and something that Celine said earlier on as well, in relation to communities and social media. When you work with a transnational partnership and when you work with different member countries within Europe, you get very, very in tune with the different cultures. And for example, our colleagues in Bilbao have developed a fantastic, like you were saying, Debbie, about the New Zealand Fire Service, working on the Kiwi sense of humour. the fire service we work with in Bilbao, in Bizkaia, have developed a very, very, very good, very, very slick Twitter campaign. But the content that they were posting was absolutely shocking to our partners in Lithuania, in Finland, and in Denmark. It showed very much a Southern Mediterranean cultural thing, whereas that approach would not work in the Nordic countries. So it made me very, very aware of the fact that if you are developing programs that, again, that you're very, very mindful, as I think Derek said, in relation to the communities, whether it be faith-led, whether it be particular demographic, etc. And it's a point that Chief Lewis also made in relation to having the data. It's important that if you are developing a program that you definitely know the demographic you want to reach, but also where you must be aware of the cultural differences that apply, and what you may think work may not work. My own experience with the what you call it, with the Be Fire Safe at School project has been great in the sense that we are professionals working in the fire sector, and some of us are professionally qualified, but we're working with teachers, again, a collaboration to get them to actually deliver the content. And what we found was that while we had all the knowledge, they had all the techniques, the skills, the methodologies, and so on. And it was only by getting them on board, by understanding their perspective, and by getting a mutual understanding of the content we want to deliver and what they can deliver and how they do deliver it, we ended up basically respecting each other's positions, realizing that we needed each other's help and we needed to bridge the information gap. As Chief Lewis said earlier on in relation to the answer about the CPR, it was a case of where you are, where you want to be, and then ultimately how you get there. And through that, it was a successful collaboration. The program itself that we developed ultimately was pilot tested and came back very, very positively, both pilot tested here in Ireland, but also as well pilot tested across Europe. And again, I can say that it is fantastic. Now, as I said, Debbie, you picked up on me up on the fact that we developed a program here for 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds in Ireland, and about having a 9-year-old daughter yourself who was engaged with that. We're having to re-examine that again because, as you know, since we developed it initially in 2006, things have moved on. Children have become more technologically aware, and teachers are using whiteboards and more technology to teach. So we have to basically mirror that and map the content across to make it more relevant to the 9 and 10-year-olds that we're facing at the moment.
Great. Thanks, Pat. That's actually a great segue because I would like to talk to Graham, Celine, and Chief Lewis about how technology can be a part of the solution. Right, let's start with you, Graham.
Yeah, thanks for that, Debbie. Yeah, this is a really good question, and you could say that there's no solution without involvement of the community. Fire services cannot address community risk in isolation. It's a partnership between the fire services and the community, and technology really plays a part in that role. A key in connecting the fire services with the community. A key role of any fire service should be to assist the community in understanding their fire risk, helping them to prepare for fire, and importantly, helping them to prevent the fire in the first place. Therefore, assisting the community to build their resilience to rapid onset emergencies. The community's resilience cannot be achieved without a partnership between the fire service and the community. A key to the reduction of community risk is to encourage the community to make behavioural changes that lead to the lowering of the risk. As a fire service, we can set up a community for success in this area by an explanation of their risk, providing fire safety advice, or the installation of smoke alarm, but it's the members of that community's acceptance of their own risk and making the necessary changes that will ultimately make the difference in lowering the risk and sustaining this over a longer term. A good example of a person-centric approach to risk reduction in fire services is fire services working with people with a disability to reduce their risk. People living with a disability in the community are in the best position to identify their own strengths and support needs in everyday life. Fire services cannot make assumptions in this area due to the many and varied personal and medical situations. People living with disability can work with fire services to understand their own unique risk profile and tailor an approach to reducing risk that suits their own particular needs. These plans can be communicated to the person's support network, and any gaps can be resolved through collaboration with those people. So community risk reduction cannot be achieved in isolation, and fire services must engage and work with the community to fully involve them in the process if success in this area is to be achieved.
Thanks, Graham. Over to you, Celine.
Thank you. So yes, indeed, technology can support community engagement, but I would also add that community should play a role in the rescue chain, because of course firefighters are efficient and they work to accomplish objectives in a short operational period to complete the mission. So traditionally, the fire service does not utilize outside assistance. But I think that if we allocate the right resources and engage the right people, then the fire service can capitalize on potential within its communities. Indeed, first responders usually are regular citizens who, after witnessing an event, they call the emergency number. So I believe that the community has an important part to play in the rescue chain. So as the first responders, people can perform first aid treatment on the victim while waiting for the firefighters to arrive on scene. So we can wonder, so what can the fire services do to better engage citizens? I would like to take one example, the example of cardiac arrests. So in France, 50,000 people die every year from cardiac arrests. And in nearly 70% of cases, cardiac arrest occurs in front of a witness. But unfortunately, the survival rate in France is only 7%. However, research proved that early defibrillation could save several thousand people each year. So in case of cardiac arrest, for example, time is a decisive factor that determines the chances of survival. And after 4 minutes, we should know that it is estimated that for every minute that passes, the survival rate decreases by 10%. And because of the time it takes to get to the scene of an accident, it is essential that bystanders to a cardiac arrest be able to call for help and begin resuscitation. So we see that civic education is a critical component in community. So in addition to training the population, new technologies are a powerful tool to support community engagement. So in France, we have developed some apps such as Staying Alive, Sauve Life, and Permis de Sauver. So they have been developed to locate defibrillators and to provide tutorials on life-saving techniques. And through these apps, firefighters can call volunteer people located near the victim so that they can go and start the life-saving techniques before the rescue team arrives on site. So with technologies, we see that citizens can also be the eyes of the firefighters before they arrive. For example, the app Expert Eye enables firefighters to do video calls with witnesses and citizens on site to better understand the situation and assess the material and human needs and determine the action plan as soon as possible. So we see that without being a firefighter, every citizen can now play a crucial part to help firefighters better do their job, and that thanks to new technologies, because new technologies are here to help make the link between the different players of the rescue chain, and the community is one of them.
Thanks, Celine. Right, to you, Chief Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. I think that was really important what you stated about people being involved in that response process and assisting. So what part should community play in becoming part of the solution? I would say a very large part, and that part is increasing and can increase, especially when you think about the way information was conveyed in the past. It was the morning newspaper. We didn't have the technology, the social media applications that we do today. So if somebody picked up the paper, they read about what happened. Feedbacks usually happened at city council meetings, formal meetings like that. Today, the feedback and the input is almost instantaneous. And we had an earlier comment made, about the rapidity of response with social media. So the community can play a part of the solution, but first of all, we have to get their attention to the point where they care. Why should they be involved? They're taking their son to the soccer game. They're, dropping their daughter off for a dance recital. They've got a busy work schedule. Why should people in the community care about what their fire department is doing? It's one of those things that many don't think about until they need it. And then when they need it, they want to know, why wasn't it there faster? Why wasn't it there sooner? Why wasn't the outcome there better? And so instead of waiting for those incidents to happen where an incident's happen that causes people to care, we have to raise that specter through other things. And I'll give an example. So something as simple as the rescue of ducklings from a storm drain. You should put that on social media, and you will get more likes and more engagement than you will on a structure fire where you rescued a person. I know, I've seen it firsthand. It's that caring aspect of people that are able to identify, in this case, with animals, which has a very, very, soft spot in many people's hearts. So if you get people to care about the why you do what you do, you can explain the what, and then you can explain why you are doing what you're doing and how they can assist you in that mission. So as long as it's part of your mission statement, which was talked to earlier, is, what is your mission statement? We can support this through technology by telling our story. Because frankly, if we don't tell our story, no one else is going to in the way that we want to. It will be reported on after the fact. So I think that getting the community to be part of the solution is to educate the ones who are paying attention and to get the people that aren't paying attention to a level where they do care and they do want to engage. I see a couple comments in here, and Chief AvSec makes a great point about 75% of the fires annual are the result of inappropriate adult behaviors. We have to educate these adults on, cooking fires, the lethality of smoking, the careless smoking fires, which have an incredibly high, fatality rate. That's very, very important. And Oakland fire, they're very, very true. The potential to leverage technology and social media is endless, especially when in the middle of this pandemic, when we've been limited with the in-person meetings. We have to result to some very creative engagements with our community, and that is only possible through technology.
Thanks, Chief Lewis. I actually believe I was one of the people that liked the duckling post that you put up there. It was, it stands out. And we've noticed the same thing. We can post fairly important messages, and then we have a picture of all of us doing something silly, and everyone likes it. At the end of the day, we're all humans. So great call and kind of engaging and connecting with people's hearts. I do actually want to expand on the question about engaging with adults, because we have had quite a focus on children, and we do know that children actually then go and engage with the adults themselves. But Chief Sawyer, could you kind of expand on that in terms of how we can engage with adults?
Absolutely. I think that's very important. So it's critical because it's easy to reach the children because you just go to the schools, whereas the adults are working, they have busy lives. So how do you reach them? One of the ways you can do that, what we did was we conducted a focus group. And by conducting a focus group, we said, we asked the question, how would you like to be communicated with in reference to fire and life safety? And we assumed that it was going to be social media or texting and things of that nature. And surprisingly, the response we got back was they still like to receive their fire and life safety information through the news media. So now you have to figure out how to partnership with the news media. So part of your community risk assessment plan has to have some type of development of partnerships to engage your community. And once we found that out, we started partnering with college, university news agencies that had their private news, try to get some PSAs out and things of that nature. But you have to make sure you understand how they want to be communicated with if you want to communicate with them effectively. So I heard a conversation a little bit about cultural competency, which is important also, because you have to also make sure you communicating with everyone in your demographic. Early on, we talked about how do you reach those high risk populations? Well, remember demographics was one of those areas you want to look into so you can target the right people. So to wrap it all up in a bow, you have to make sure first and foremost you understand how that adult population wants to be communicated with, and then develop those partnerships to get those messages out.
Thanks, Chief. So, right, we're actually on to our last question, unless there are more from the audience. As I said, we haven't managed to get Martin back on. We will actually record his and communicate it out on LinkedIn. So please watch out for that. But this has actually come up across in a few of the questions, and I see that Shara, who is one of our next panelists, has commented on it as well, and a great segue into our next discussion, which is on culture and change. But how important is diversity in the industry to actually help with this engagement? And I'm going to start with you, Chief Lewis.
So especially, given the current makeup of what's going on in today's world, especially in the United States, I think it's very, very important that a community sees themselves reflected in the public servants, which provide care and essential services to them. They have to be able to identify with the people who are providing those services. It can't be an us and them. If you want recruitment and to come from the community, to be representative of the community, it must match that. So when people think about, diversity, many times the first things that come to mind is just ethnicity and gender. And I would say these are two important factors, but there is much more to diversity than just gender and ethnicity. Diversity is much more than just these two immutable factors. It's conveyed in life experiences such as military service, experiences that people have, such as growing up in a foreign country, living abroad. It could be exposure to events, circumstances, prior work, training experiences that can contribute to a shared body of knowledge. So I would say look beyond when you think about diversity, think of it in a very, very large sense. Don't be focused on a particular ethnicity or a particular gender. It is important that during recruitment events for your fire department, that these events are made up of individuals which represent your community so that others can identify. And the example that I use often is, it's the little girl in first or second grade that can look up to that engineer or that lieutenant on that fire apparatus that comes for that school visit and wonder and say, this is amazing. I can be you when I grow up. I've heard all kinds of comments and questions from little children that sometimes they didn't realize that this could be a role for them. And I remember that even as a child, of being able to identify with some of the people that came to our school. So advertisements for these positions, again, using social media, they need to be reflective of the diversity that you have in your organization and the diversity that you want in your organization. And yes, that may be just the picture, but they first of all need to see themselves as being able to be in that role, to fit in that role. And then there's an entire add-on to that, which is the culture of your organization, which then needs to be welcoming of that diversity, because it does no good to put out advertisements and posters, and if you do not have that embraced by your personnel, if that is not supported from the top levels and the bottom up in your organization, that this is who we are, this is what we value a diverse workforce because of what all of these people bring to the table with the variety of life experiences, which makes us all better when we work together. Again, the ability to identify with emergency personnel builds a connectedness, and connectedness with the community builds trust, and trust is just essential for meaningful engagement with your community.
I couldn't agree more, Chief Lewis. I think that works beyond the fire service, and I can talk from OpsCentral experience. We actually come from Wales, South Africa, France. We actually even have some New Zealanders on the team. You know, we look at it across the board, from small towns, from big cities. You know, obviously gender diversity. We've got the whole range, and what that brings in terms of looking at things from a different angle. You know, never mind helps kind of engaging and helps us understand people, but it means that we actually challenge each other in a different way than if you kind of all think the same way. So great response. Right, over to you, Chief Sawyer.
Yeah, I think Chief Lewis did a great job, and I want to thank Chief Lewis, because sometimes when we talk about diversity from a person that is diverse, it doesn't come across the same, because it's like we're just saying, oh, we're complaining. But coming from a chief like Chief Lewis, it gives it some validity. But the reason why diversity is important is because of this. When you're going into the community and you're trying to have a conversation during difficult times, the community has to be comfortable that they can even relate to you. So, for example, when I talked about the fire where we had lost the large life of children, and there was a little bit of an uproar in the community, they didn't want to hear from certain people in the community because they felt like they didn't have a voice prior to this incident. So they wanted to hear from people that look like them, that they can relate to them. And it goes back to cultural competency again. When you're talking to a diverse community and you don't understand that you shouldn't be talking to, in an Islamic situation, you have to talk to the male of the household, you can get yourself in trouble and cause a bridge in that community. So understanding your community, the diversity, and how it impacts not only your fire service, but how you relate to the fire service, how you can engage your community. You can't engage a community that your fire service doesn't look like, because there's always this disconnect and divide. So we want to make sure we close that gap by having a diverse fire service, so that we can address each and every aspect of the community. We have to make sure we identify the different languages in the community. How do we put out literature or fire and life safety information that doesn't apply to everyone in the community? So now you're going to miss out on part of that high risk population, especially if your high risk population is part of that diversity in your community. So I think Chief Allen put it very succinctly. I think that we as a fire service have to do a better job of engaging. If you see it, you can believe it. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. If we want to make sure that we attract a more diverse applicant or recruit, again, they have to see that we're already there a little bit. If you see it, you can believe it. And if you can believe it, you can achieve it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chief Sawyer. Right, that seems it for questions today. If there are any further questions for the panelists, please reach out to them on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for all of you joining us, and I'm really gutted that we didn't get to hear Martin's opinions, but I'm sure we'll have him back for future discussions. A reminder again, please reach out to me if you would like to be involved in any of these, or if you'd like to be on our advisory panel. And that's it for today. And thank you, Toma, for running it. You'll see a nice link there if you want to actually see what events are coming up, and we'll take it from there. Thanks, everyone.